Hi, it's time to read again. When we just left our story, Hank's dog and Mr. Gristiliano's dog, Nina, had a wild rumpus. They turned circles around his living room and made a disaster of everything. When the chapter ended, Cheerio had been caught by Hank. Chapter 19 and 20 are very short, and 21 is longer. Chapter 19 is where Hank makes a list of things that he thinks about. He's done this before, kind of telling us how he's thinking in his brain. Chapter 19. We're friends, right? So you know me by now, at least a little bit. So you've probably figured out that when bad things happen to me, I make a list in my head. That's exactly what I did as I looked around the mess that used to be Mr. Gristiliano's beautiful apartment. The next 6 things I predict will happen to me by Hank Zipner, also known as Captain Destructo. Number 1. Mr. Gristiliano, who is really a genie in disguise, will grant me 3 wishes. For my first wish, I will wish that none of this ever happened, and it won't. Number 2, for my second wish, I will wish for front row seat tickets at the Mets game, and I will get them. While sitting in my box at the Mets game, I will catch more foul balls than any fan ever did. Number 4, they will offer me a position on the Mets as a center fielder. I will accept the position and become the youngest baseball player in America. Number 5, for my third wish, I will wish for world peace, because that's what Papa Pete always wishes for when he blows out his birthday candles. Number 6, I will become world famous as a peace-loving baseball star. Chapter 20 is just a page, really a couple paragraphs. Chapter 20. You must have guessed by now that number 1 through 6 didn't come true. Instead, what happened was that Mr. Gristiliano called my parents and said that he had to see them right away about a very serious matter. So much for my predictions. I guess I don't have much of a future in crystal ball business. Crystal ball means you can tell the future by looking in a ball. Chapter 21. The hardest thing in the world is waiting. Especially when you're waiting for bad news. It only took 20 minutes for my parents to get to Mr. Gristiliano's, but it seemed like 20 years. Mr. Gristiliano. I asked Papa Pete if he would take Ashley, Frankie, and Robert home. They got into this mess to help me out. I didn't see any reason to have them there to take the blame. Papa Pete told me he was proud of me, of my decision, because I was taking responsibility for my own actions. Before he left, he took my face in his hands and whispered, "Remember, Hanky, truth. Truth is the magic word." Papa Pete took Cheerio home too. Poor Cheerio. After Mr. Gristiliano's store managers left, Cheerio flopped down next to the fireplace and started to lick the bricks as though they were doggy candy. Don't ask me why. You just can't explain a lot of what Cheerio does. Nina wanted to play with him, but Cheerio had lost all interest in her. That's him. In love 1 minute, licking bricks the next. When we were alone, I offered to help Mr. Gristiliano clean up the mess in his apartment. "I think you've done enough damage already," he said. He was holding a piece of one of the china ducks that had broken in half. "I bought these in Italy," he said. "I paid a pretty penny for them, as I recall." "I really am sorry, Mr. Gristiliano," I said. "I didn't mean to break anything." He didn't answer. I couldn't blame him. I'd be angry too, if I were him. I bent down and started to pick up the chess pieces that were scattered all across the floor. I had to do something to help. Very carefully, I put them back on the board the way they were supposed to go. I see you play chess, Mr. Gristiliano said. My grandpa taught me. He began to sweep up the pieces of the blue flower vase. It was quiet. Do you play chess? I asked. Yes, he said. My father taught me. He played a lot of chess. My dad does crossword puzzles, I said. Do you do them too? No way, I'm a terrible speller. Me too, he said. I was a teenager before I could spell my name correctly. Really? Really. Of course, it's not that easy when your name is Vincenzo Giovanni Gristiliano. My brother got off easy. His name is Mike. Look at that long name. Let's see if I can show you. And perhaps I'm not saying it right. It's right here. I bet you Luciana could say it. I think it's an Italian name. I hope to hear from you, Luch. I'm really sorry, Mr. Gristiliano, I said. I didn't mean to break anything. He didn't answer. I couldn't blame him. Oh, I'm not there. Sorry. I laughed. Mr. Gristiliano smiled for the first time since the disaster. I couldn't believe he could smile after all the trouble I had caused. The doorman downstairs rang the buzzer and said to say that my parents had arrived. I sighed. There it was, the moment I had definitely not been waiting for. When Mom came in and saw the mess, she shot me one of those mom looks. It was the one that said, I don't know what you've done, but how could you have done this? You've probably gotten that look sometime in your life. I know I have. Deserved it, probably. My dad had a different look on his face. It was the same he had when he went to the dentist for a root canal on his back molar. Let me just say that we are sorry, my mom began. Of course, we'll take care of everything that's broken, my dad added. Mr. Gristiliano offered them a seat on the couch. My dad sat down, then reached under his behind and pulled out a piece of salami that had gotten wedged in between the pillows. When he put the salami into the ashtray on the coffee table, I could see a wad of manila envelope mushed up inside it. Hank, I think you need to tell your parents what happened here today, Mr. Gristiliano said. I'm sure they would like an explanation, as would I. Listen, I can make up a story at the drop of a hat, right? I can. Sitting there on the couch with all of them waiting for me to talk, I was tempted. Should I tell another lie? I could have said alien worms invaded the salami and planted secret papers in it. No. I could have said a superhero named Captain Destructo had told me to destroy all the lunch meat to save the world from the evil soy. No. Truth, I heard Papa Pete say. Truth. In my mind's ear. And so, I told the truth. The whole truth. And nothing but the truth. I started at the very beginning with the 3 Ds on my report card. I told them how ashamed I was of those grades. I described everything that happened after that. The meat grinder, the recipe switch, the plan to seize the salami. At the end, I even pointed to the chunk of brown manila folder wadded up in the salami on the coffee table. My parents could not believe what they were hearing. Their mouths were hanging open. So wide that you could have planted a tree inside their mouth. There were no words to describe how they reacted. Well, maybe there are. Angry, embarrassed, shocked, disappointed. Hot under the collar? Sorry, that's 3 words. Oops, I meant 4. If I knew how to spell infuriated, I'd put that down too. I'm out of words now, so let me just say this. Imagine confessing to your mom and dad the worst thing you've ever done. Yeah, I've had to do that. Imagine what their faces would look like. Imagine how their voices would sound. Imagine steam coming out of the top of their heads. You get the picture. Good, because that's how my parents looked when I finished talking. Hank, how could you? my mom asked. She turned to Mr. Cristiano. We don't know what Hank was thinking. You better get used to your room, my dad said to me, because you'll be spending all your time there. I don't want to butt into family business, said Mr. Cristiano, but may I make a suggestion? I was sure he was going to suggest that I go to jail and just eat bread and water for a year. This sounds like a situation I had with my own family, with my middle daughter, Angela. She ground her report card. Did she ground her report card into lunch meat? I asked. I'm sure she would have liked to, Mr. Cristiano said. Angela was a very bright child who did very poorly at school. We were always so frustrated with her. Even worse, she was always frustrated with herself. She grew to believe she just wasn't smart. Boy, do I know how she feels, I thought. When she got to junior high, one of Angela's teachers suggested we get her tested to see if she had any learning differences. It turned out she did. Angela was smart. Don't get me wrong, she just learns in a different way. A different way than a lot of kids do. Do you know that 1 out of every 5 children have learning challenges? I'm sure I had them too, but when I was growing up, no one even knew there was such a thing. Mr. Cristiano had trouble learning. No way. He owned the biggest supermarket grocery store chain in all of New York. Where is Angela now? My mom asked. She's a senior at Columbia University, said Mr. Cristiano. Once we figured out how she learned best, we got her help, and her grades improved dramatically. In fact, everything changed for her. Do you think they're going to change for Hank? I feel a change in the story coming. Do you? I assume you're telling us this for a reason, my dad said. As I listened to Hank just now, he reminds me so much of Angela and of myself, too. Mr. Cristiano said, his frustration, his shame in failing, it's all so unnecessary. I'm no expert, but if Hank were my son, I'd see about getting him tested. I looked over at my mom and dad. We all said the same thing at the same time. Mr. Rock. That's exactly what Mr. Rock had said after I spent a week in detention with him. He said he thought I should be tested to see if I had learning challenges. He even came over to our house to tell my parents that. What a cool teacher, huh? He said exactly what Mr. Cristiano said, but without the Angela part. When Mr. Rock suggested it, my mom thought it was a good idea to get me tested, but my dad refused. Instead, he gave me a lecture about Stanley Zipf's theory of success in school. According to his theory, all you have to do is put your butt in the chair and study, and you'll do fine. End of story. I've never been able to convince my dad that I really do study. I study, I just don't learn. That's not exactly true. I learn some things. In fact, I learn a lot of things that are really easy for me, like memorizing poems. Wait a minute. I learn some things. In fact, a lot of things are really easy for me, like memorizing poems and remembering facts from history. My brain just gobbles that stuff like Hershey Kisses. But other subjects like spelling, math, or drawing, those are really hard. I feel as though when I'm trying to learn those things, my brain says, sorry, I'm closed. Before we left, my parents offered again to pay Mr. Cristiano for everything that Cheerio destroyed. I'll tell you what, he said. You can pay me back by looking into testing for Hank. My dad didn't say anything. My mom said she would make arrangements right away. After we left, I apologized to Mr. Cristiano. As we left, I apologized to Mr. Cristiano for causing so much trouble. I hope you learned something from everything that happened today, he said. Growing up is tough, Hank. It's not all smooth sailing. Boy, was he nice. We were pretty quiet the whole walk home. When we got back to our apartment, my mom went right into her bedroom. I could hear dialing on the phone. and calling someone on the phone. Was she calling for testing? Already? What do you think? Is it going to help? It's going to help figure out how he learns best? I hope so. I'm pulling for Hank. Are you? Come back for chapter 22. See you then. Hope you're doing well. Bye.